On day 2 of the final Lori Daybell trial, more warnings and more intense exchanges between her and the judge, removed from the courtroom and put on timeout. The victim in the case back on the stand to be questioned by his former relative, the so-called Doomsday Mom, accused of trying to get him killed. Developing twist in court with the possibility of opening the door for the jury to hear about 4 previous murders that Daybell has been convicted for. I'm Justin Lum, and we are on the record. If you've been following this case and these 2 trials here in Arizona for Lori Daybell as long as we have, then you know that Judge Justin Beresky has been patient, to say the least, accommodating for the pro se defendant that is the so-called Doomsday Mom. Fox 10 investigator Justin Lum here with Special Projects EP George Obi. Multiple warnings after several objections about the line of questioning, bringing in the character of Lori Daybell as Lori Daybell cross-examined Brandon Boudreaux for the first time and brought up how this was a happy family and she, watched his kids grow up, helped, and witnessed their, coming into this world and, the love that she had for Melanie Boudreaux, her niece, and his ex-wife. But this was slowly cracking open the door more and more. And Trina Kay, the prosecutor, was ready to tell the jury the real facts behind why we're here and how we're here.
Lori has made kind of a living in court trying to persuade anybody who will listen that her character, her personality, her demeanor, that she wants people to look at her, as someone who is nice and would never do these horrible things. And so we heard yesterday Brandon obviously not describe her in a way that made her look bad. He obviously blamed her in a roundabout way of ruining his marriage to Melanie. And so clearly I think Lori wanted to try and reestablish that she's not this horrible person.
Yeah.
She's not the one that would make accusations. She would, but again, like you said, she's walking a fine line because, as the judge has said, look, your character, if you want to go that route, there are things about your character in your past that if you open that door, it's going to be real hard to close.
Convictions in 4 murders.
Yes. And so she spent a lot of time cross-examining Brandon, but she specifically spent a lot of time talking about their family dynamic and more specifically his relationship and his marriage at one point to Melanie.
And the cross-exam was broken up. We had breaks. The jury needed breaks, 10, 15-minute breaks, and you had these sidebars, some of them longer sidebars lasting for 10 to 15 minutes. But at one point this morning, right, we hear the term 404B. We hear the term 405, criminal law rules that are being discussed that we're not experts on. But in this case, Lori wanted a hearing to discuss how she could, talk about herself and have this line of questioning. But again, the what Judge Beresky said is that, even though the state had withdrawn that 404B notice or whatnot, they can, if you open the door, they're going to walk right through it. Let's listen to this the most intense exchange between Daybell and Beresky.
We've concluded that sidebar, a record's been made. I would just caution the defendant, again, she needs to be very careful, and she's getting into areas that could open a huge door that I don't think she wants open. I'm going to make another record at 1024 to 1025. We held a sidebar that I don't think made it onto the court record. That sidebar, again, discussed similar issues of if the defendant brings in evidence or testimony that she was a good person and no ill intent and those sorts of things, and specific acts of her being a good person, it could open the door to other things that she may not want the door open to. The state, the defendant, and advisory counsel were at the bench when we had that short 1 minute sidebar, but I don't know if anyone wants to supplement the record on that. Ms. Kay?
Just, Your Honor, that, again, the state did raise any issue of character evidence under 404A and 405, that if the defendant opens the door and tries to advise that she is a good person, a peaceful person, a kind person, a loving person, any of those other types of things, that we believe that would allow us under 405 to then bring in specific acts, such as the murder of her children, her husband, and her current husband's wife.
All right.
Which would also be 404B that they withdrew.
No, it'd be
Yeah,
405.
they withdrew it, but if you bring up 404 that you.
Then all 404B is in, or do we get a hearing on what 404B can come in? If I open the door, do I get a hearing? We stop trial and I get a hearing on.
Stop. We'll have a very short hearing, okay? If you're going to introduce how you have great character and good character, we're going to have a short hearing on what evidence that they can bring in to rebut that character, which could
Okay.
include being convicted of 4 murders.
And
So,
would you
talk
like?
to your advisory counsel during the break. And
You don't
maybe
need to yell at me either.
they- yelling at you, okay?
Yeah, you are, and you do not need to talk
Okay,
to me that way. I'm
take her
very
out.
courteous.
Take her out.
I'm very courteous to
Take
you.
her out. No, you have been nothing near courteous to me during the course of these proceedings. Talk with your advisory council about the rest of your cross. We're going to resume in 15 minutes.
So Lori gets put on timeout for about 10 to 15 minutes. They get back into the courtroom after that, and Judge Beresky is calmed down, and he tells her, if you keep doing that, we're taking away the pro per status. You're going to have an advisory council, represent you, which would be a whole other situation.
Yeah.
So she is, once again, given that warning, that final warning. She gets to cross Brandon. She apologizes. She's
Mhm.
fine after
Mhm.
that very fiery exchange. But with the cross with Brandon, you see the trauma that he's going through, reliving it, and being questioned by the person who's accused of being behind all of this.
Right.
And it was long cross, like you said, going into the afternoon, and we get into this allegation of how he was accused of being gay and
Yeah.
having and leading to marital problems.
Yeah, I mean, he even admitted that even before June, late June of 2019, that things were starting to get rocky.
Mhm. The
He didn't.
influence, right?
Yeah,
Like,
he didn't get into great detail about specifics or what he believed the reasoning behind all of this was, but clearly I think he was working to maybe salvage his marriage at that point, and you get the indication that he feels like Lori wasn't helping, that Lori was almost making it worse. And again, the accusations obviously is one thing, and look, this is from Lori's perspective. This is your niece,
yeah.
but if you really felt strongly that Brandon wasn't the right guy for your niece, there are ways to handle that. And then you talk about the revoking, when it comes to the LDS faith, and there were certain intricacies there. All of this kind of, again, the jury is being painted a picture that Lori is meddling, if you will, in this marriage, and Lori tried to bring it back in her questioning, like, look, are you saying you didn't say this, or you almost like, I would never do that. That's not who I am.
Well, they spent a lot of time together as aunt and niece, and
Yeah.
she was looked at as a mother-like figure, according to Brandon, but she is starting to have these bizarre religious beliefs already.
Yes.
2018
And we know
into
that by now,
2019.
yes.
We
That's
know
already
that,
been in court.
and she's been convicted
Mhm.
because of that, or that evidence has been presented in Idaho and even here in Arizona for Charles Vallow's murder. And he was dealing with those struggles of trying to get her help mentally
Yes.
because of what she was saying about being a god and all of the stuff, and having the affair with Chad Daybell, who is the teacher in this
Yes.
case. But we know her pattern of cross-examine. Did you see me do that? And so here's her cross-examining Brandon about the whole situation of him being called gay.
On June 25th, Melanie told me that she believed that I was gay, correct?
That she herself had that belief.
Yes.
Not that that belief had come from me, but that belief had come from herself.
Are you asking me whether or not I think that that belief came from you?
No, I'm saying, did she convey to you that she had that belief, period?
Yes.
Okay. And then later in the next line, you tell Detective Tiller, you convey to him that I convinced her of that fact.
Yes.
Okay. What made you believe I convinced her of that fact?
Conversations I'd had with Charles Vallow.
Okay, so did you hear me tell that to Melanie Boudreau?
No.
Did you ever witness me talking to her about you?
Did I witness you talking to Melanie about me
Correct.
at any point?
About this topic, about being gay?
No, I did not witness you talking to her about this topic.
Okay, so you heard it from a third party, supposedly.
I heard it from Charles Vallow.
Okay, but not from me directly. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Fact that the jury has heard from Brandon that he believes, bottom line, that Lori had an influence on the end of his marriage because of how much influence that she had on her niece Melanie Pawlowski. And now we got to know and be confirmed through Trina K that she's a part of this investigation, this open case, as someone that is still being looked at as a suspect for alleged involvement. Has not been charged. No charges have been recommended at this time, but in this years-long investigation, she is clearly part of the inner circle and has been looked at as such.
Yeah, yet another unanswered question is we didn't know whether she was a prime suspect in all of this, whether she would be charged. For those that aren't aware, police departments can forward charges to the county attorney whenever they want, whenever they feel their case is strong enough. County attorney can then return that case and say, look, this isn't strong enough for a conviction. You either need more or we're not going to proceed. So this is the first time that those of us who have covered
Really
this
hear
saga.
it.
Yeah, we're the first time we've heard it on the record.
And
as our panel said, there's no reason for Trina to make this up or throw it out there for any reason. The jury was not privy to this. So I think for us to hear that, and for those who are following this to hear that, I think it opens up a whole nother realm of possibility, because we have often wondered, again, unanswered question is, what was Melanie's role and why has she
how much did she know?
Right.
We know she knew a lot about the religious beliefs
We've
because that's
seen
all
those
been brought out.
conversations,
Those
yes.
conversations, she's testified once before as well. Now, the reason this was brought up is because Lori wanted to bring in emails where Detective Pillar and Brandon Boudreau are having conversations over the months following
in February of
shooting.
2020, yes.
And he wants to know if there's any information he needs to know about that would motivate Melanie at the time. Financial gain, not financial gain for Lori. So she's trying to, divert this somehow, but also saying she's not trying to blame Melanie. And Prosecutor Trina K says, you want to open that door? Because those emails involve separate investigations.
Yes.
And we see what happens through the afternoon where there's a specific way of asking, whereas the jury still doesn't get all the details about the prior murder investigations.
Right, and we wondered
convictions.
what was in those emails, because you're right, there are going to be apparently things in those emails that would kind of open the Pandora's box to all of everything that had transpired, say, in the 3 or 4 months before February of 2020.
So they kind of like cracked it open. They didn't fully open the Pandora's box, but just enough to say Brandon provided information, screenshots, financial documents and things like that. But speaking of Ryan Pillar, lead case agent, very key in this. So he takes the stand talking about how he investigated the shooting, and the focus is back on this Jeep suspect vehicle that we know Tylee Ryan drove, but she had been, now we know, dead already, murdered in September. This happens in October, and the belief is that Alex Cox is driving this vehicle, and we're given a preview of license plate readers and how that was going to work out. Pillar gives a lot of, technical testimony, a lot of logistics and how the investigative process works for police and where the suspicion comes in. But we know that this Jeep was missing a rear tire on the back end and also the back seat. And I like this explanation in the direct exam and how Trina gets out how this Jeep was located across state lines. Let's take a listen.
On October 16th, did you learn that a license plate reader had recorded Lori Vallow's Jeep with that Texas plate LWD 0997 on the I-40 on October 1st of 2019?
Yes.
Was that reader located in Holbrook, Arizona?
Yes.
How long before the shooting of Brandon was Lori Vallow's Jeep seen on that I-40 heading towards Phoenix?
That Jeep was seen on the I-40 heading towards Phoenix approximately 26 hours and 30 minutes prior to the shooting at Brandon Boudreaux. In particular, the LPR, the license plate reader, has cameras. This was a DPS camera, if I recall correctly. Took a picture of the Jeep Wrangler with the Texas license plate LWD0997. And there was no wheel affixed to the back of the Jeep Wrangler, which Jeep Wranglers are typically have that wheel affixed to the back of them. In this image, 26 hours prior to the shooting, the wheel was not affixed to the back of that Jeep.
So now the jury has it very clear to them that this Jeep, the suspect vehicle, had moved from out of state and driven here 26 hours prior, and is seen by the victim here very, very clearly, located at the Vallow home back in July of 2019 for an incident regarding Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. So the name Alex Cox is being thrown out a lot. We know about his Ford pickup truck as well. It's very clear that, he uses guns. And another thing, Lori likes to cross-examine and try to poke holes in testing and law enforcement, what they didn't do. This whole neighborhood was canvassed. There was 14 detectives assigned to the scene. Pillar says we collected gunshot residue once we got that Jeep in November from Rexburg, Idaho. So all of these dots are connected because they had moved over to Rexburg, Idaho. Gunshot residue tested and DNA from the Jeep.
Right, and we're going to get into that on Monday. He is going to describe a lot of that part of the case, and then it sounds like the timeline. We're getting closer to narrowing that 26 hours, and as I predict, they're going to have evidence to show that same Jeep is now in the neighborhood a couple hours before, or at least the night before, the shooting at Brandon's house. At least I'm anticipating that's where she's going with this.
Homer J. Maximus Gmail account, a device that would have GPS tracking as well. So you have license plate readers and you have cell phone data. They want to narrow this down to Alex Cox. Right now they haven't said it yet, but gunshot residue tested, DNA taken from the Jeep. They want to make it clear and establish to the jury, this is who we believe is the shooter, and we're going to tell you why he was put up to this by Lori Vallow Daybell. So a lot of forensic evidence today. Nate Duncan also took the stand, but Ryan Pillar now the 9th witness. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, this is the first time where we had Pillar, a lead agent on the Gilbert case, and then Duncan, lead agent on the Chandler case, together in an Arizona trial, all testifying against Lori Daybell. They testified in the Idaho trial, but, in this, last final chapter, here they are giving Trina what she needs to present this to the jury. It has been interesting already in 2 days, 9 witnesses. We still have to finish up the 9th with Pillar. But yeah, Monday morning, we'll see how Lori Daybell at some point tries to poke holes in his investigation.
And we should say that if at the end of court today, there was some housekeeping. Trina said that the prosecutor said that, look, I have 3 witnesses I'm bringing in next week. So that would make 12, clearly halfway through. And as we learned in the last trial, they didn't call every witness they planned on calling. They rested early.
Yeah. All right, so that'll do it for us. We cover a lot here. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. See you next time on The Record.